In a major U-turn, the government has said A-level and GCSE students in England will be given the grades assessed by their teachers or their moderated grade if it was higher. It follows uproar after about 40% of A-level results were downgraded by exams regulator Ofqual, which used a formula based on schools' prior grades and resulted in some students losing university places. The Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, has apologised for the distress caused. The chair of the exam regulator Ofqual, Roger Taylor, explained the decision to back down.
Teacher assessed grades, centre assessed grades, the grades that schools and colleges set as being the grade they thought students would achieve in an exam, should be awarded for GCSEs and A-levels and ASs. BTECs are not affected by this decision.
This decision was made almost a week after Scotland reached the same conclusion. What's changed?
What changed was seeing the experience of young people receiving grades and being distressed at the need to then have to go and appeal grades where they felt they were wrong. This was causing anxiety for young people. It was putting an administrative burden on teachers at a time when they need to be preparing for the new school term. And seeing this, we realised that we had taken the wrong road here, and we needed to change course. These are unprecedented circumstances. The task we attempted to do was to set exam grades with no exams taking place. We developed an approach that has been used in other countries as well. But it is clear that while it may have technical merits in some ways, but it is simply has not been an acceptable experience for young people. And we have therefore decided that we should change course and allow the centre assessed grades to be awarded.
Isn't this really your opportunity to say sorry unequivocally to students and their families who've had 5 agonising, stressful days?
Yes, I would like to say sorry. We have recognised the difficulty that young people have faced coping with the receipt of grades that they were unable to understand the basis on which they had been awarded, and I would like to say sorry for that, and we are now taking steps to put that right.
With us now is our political correspondent, Helen Catt. So, Helen, we heard there from the chair of Ofqual explaining the change. I'd be interested to know, though, why you think this change has been made and why now?
Well, it is a significant U-turn. Let's be clear about that from the start. We had until the weekend the Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, standing by the standardisation system, saying that actually to do this and return to teacher assessed grades would devalue grades for this year. So this is a big and remarkable change. The argument that you heard there from Ofqual, saying that it became apparent in recent days about the distress that it was causing students having to go through an appeal process, I think there are going to be a lot of questions asked about that, but why that wasn't, well, to be honest, a bit more obvious that it was going to be stressful for students to get exams grades that they didn't believe they deserved, and having to go through that appeal process and put their university places on hold, and certainly questions that are going to be asked of ministers for why they didn't foresee the political fallout of this, particularly given what happened in Scotland just a week earlier, that they'd had time to see what happened there. Why did we then see a repeat of that in England, and why did they dig in for so long before reversing this decision? Now, the Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, had said that it was because it had resulted in more significant inconsistencies than could be resolved through an appeals process. So I think there are going to be more questions asked about that.
And how much pressure is he under, do you think?
Well, he's certainly come in for a lot of criticism, and there has been rising pressure from some of his Conservative colleagues to make this U-turn over the last few days and to explain why it got to this position. So I think certainly he's going to have to do quite a lot of explaining, but whether that will lead to anything further in terms of him, losing his position in Cabinet, I think we'll just have to wait and see. We are in extraordinary times, and we are looking to get schools back next month. So whether that, Boris Johnson Johnson would want to make a change at his top team at that point. I think that would be unlikely, but, you know, this is politics. We'll have to wait and see what happens with that.
OK, Helen, stay where you are, because we're going to hear now from the Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson. He was asked if he was going to apologise to the A-level students affected.
Of course, incredibly sorry for all those students who have been through this. When we came up with the system, which was broadly supported across the spectrum of calculated grades, what we were doing is to ensure that we have the fairest possible system, making sure that we look after the interests of all students. But when it became apparent that there were unfairnesses within the system, it was the right thing to act.
When did that become apparent?
So over the weekend, it became clearer to me that there were a level of the number of students who were getting grades that, frankly, they shouldn't have been getting and should have been doing a lot better. And the evidence, both from Ofqual and other external bodies, was apparent that action needed to be taken. The first course would be to always make sure that we have the most robust and broad-ranging appeals process, and that's what we had worked to ensure that was put in place. But as we looked at it in greater detail, over Saturday and Sunday, it became evident that further action needed to be taken.
Now, is this not something that you should have been speaking to Ofqual about before? It's concerning that you only saw these discrepancies over the weekend.
Yeah, well, all the way through this process, when Ofqual did their very extensive consultation with over 12,000 people taking part, and all the way and run up to the exam series, we've constantly asked for reassurance about the fairness of the system. Fairness to make sure that children from the most disadvantaged backgrounds didn't suffer, make sure that children from ethnic minority backgrounds are not in a situation where they were unfairly downgraded. And as we got the results, we always understandably ask for that reassurance and that confirmation that this has been done fairly and in the best interest of students. But at the weekend, as more evidence came in, it was clear that we needed to act. That's what we have done, and that's why we're going to be moving to the process of centre-assessed grades, making sure equally that those children who got a higher grade, of which there are a considerable number of children who got a higher grade than the centre-assessed grade, that actually there's a situation where none of them will have that grade marked down, but to the centre-assessed grade.
The Education Secretary there, Gavin Williamson. Our political correspondent, Helen Catt, is still with us, and you were listening to that along with me, Helen. Will that explanation be enough to silence his critics, do you think?
Well, I think there are still going to be questions asked about that timing, about the lack of political foresight, if you like, as to how it got to this stage where they're having to make what is a very visible U-turn several days after those results were announced. There are also questions still around, for example, some Conservative MPs this evening saying, well, what about BTECs? We know that you've done this for A-levels, but not, you know, that it doesn't apply to BTECs. So what happens there and what goes with that? I mean, it's worth remembering, of course, that it's not just that in England that this U-turn has happened. The Welsh Government have also done exactly the same today, and the Northern Irish Executive have all decided to backtrack on that idea of standardisation for A-levels and, crucially, for GCSEs when they come out later this week, and to go with those teacher-assessed grades instead. But I think there are going to be more questions as well, because this does also cause issues for universities now, who've already now given out offers and places and now having to potentially find space for more students. Now, the government has lifted the cap, we understand, on the number of students that can go to try and help that, but certainly it has caused more problems down the line. So I don't think this by any means just draws a line under it, and I certainly think there'll be more questions as well about the politics of this coming from Conservative backbenchers, about how they got to this situation where you had young, high-achieving kids being left in a situation of great distress for several days. That is absolutely not what any government wants to do.
Helen Catt at Westminster. For now, thank you. We can speak now to Emily King, who was downgraded from a C to a U in one of her A-level subjects. Emily, it's good to see you again. I know you and I spoke last week. I wanted to start with the apology from Gavin Williamson, the Education Secretary. He says, "I am sorry for the distress this has caused young people and their parents, but hope this announcement will now provide the certainty and reassurance they deserve." Does that apply to you?
Well, I'm still not 100% sure if I'm going to get into university at the minute, so I think it's just caused unnecessary stress that I didn't need right now.
Just tell us again what you were hoping to do, what your predicted grades were, and then, as I say, one of them downgraded to a U, a fail.
Yeah, and I think it's just crazy how someone can go from a C to a U, and that's for people who literally don't even turn up for the exam.
So what were you hoping to do? Had you got a place at university?
Yeah, I had a place well, I do still have it kind of, but it's at University of Lincoln to do midwifery.
And when you say you've still got it kind of, tell me a little bit more about that. What have they said to you?
Well, they've said that I need to send over my teacher assessment grades, and then they'll review that and see if I can get in. But they are currently keeping my place open.
That's good news. For how long? Do you know that?
I think it should be until the 7th of September, if I'm right.
So therefore, at the moment, are you feeling more confident that you will get your place at your first choice University of Lincoln to study midwifery as you want to?
I'm not 100% sure, but I'm more hopeful than I was when I had to appeal my grade.
Right, and why are you not 100% sure?
Because I still don't have a place at university at the minute.
Right, so it's almost chicken and an egg, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I can see this has been unbelievably stressful for you. Can you give us a sense of what the last 5 days have been like?
I've been extremely stressed. I've just been thinking about it like non-stop all the time, waiting to see how to appeal my grade and whether I'm actually going to be attending university in October.
Okay, well look, I hope you're getting plenty of support and good luck, Emily. Fingers crossed. Thank you. Well, the announcement on A-levels in England followed an earlier one from the Welsh Government, which